Hiya, people of the internet. My name is Cassandra, and welcome to Queued, the series where I watch and review all of my absolute favorite shows, and you come along for the ride. Today we're going to be talking about the first episode of the original Season 1 of Doctor Who. If you know me, you know that it's my absolute favorite show, and I am so excited to talk about it today. This season stars William Hartnell as the Doctor, William Russell as Ian Chesterton, Jacqueline Hill as Barbara Wright, and Carol Ann Ford as Susan Foreman. The series came about when the BBC had a gap to fill in the Saturday tea time schedule, and Sydney Newman, having just produced ABC's The Avengers, suggested a sci-fi show. After that, a committee made up of producers and writers created the base of the series. Before we talk about the first serial, I want to talk about the pilot episode. The first cut of episode 1, referred to as the pilot episode, was scrapped because Newman thought it had too many technical errors and he decided to change up the characters. The original version was not broadcast until 1991. It is now available on VHS, if you still have that, DVD, and streaming on BritBox. So let's talk about the key differences between this episode and the first official episode. In this version, instead of reading a book about the French Revolution, Susan is doodling what looks like the TARDIS console. Instead of his telltale Edwardian garb, the Doctor wears a modern suit and tie. And originally, the Doctor is much less affectionate to Susan. He even calls her a stupid child, whereas in the official version, he's more like a protective grandfather. In this edition, Susan specifies that she was born in the 49th century. The broadcast version removed this. So as for canon, as for continuity, it's hard to say. The Doctor Who canon and continuity are both very difficult things. Like they change often. The Doctor will say something and then say something else, or a character will say something that completely negates something else, or something that wasn't canon becomes canon. It's hard to tell. Susan is also more mature and sensual in this version. Eventually, this was scaled back to make her more identifiable to children. I think this is both a good and a bad thing that we'll get to a little bit later. There were also many technical errors which led to the re-recording of this episode. The first serial of Doctor Who is known as An Unearthly Child. The first series, for a few years, each episode was separately titled, and then eventually they began naming the serials all one title, and it being part 1, part 2, part 3. If you get a DVD or you watch it on BritBox, the title will be An Unearthly Child, part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, but on the title cards you can still see all the different titles of each individual episode. So this serial saw the introduction of the 4 title characters, the TARDIS, and briefly at the very end, the world of Skaro. It aired from November 23rd to December 14th, 1963. The story of this serial revolves around teachers Barbara Wright and Ian Chesterton, who try to figure out an odd student that they're worried about, Susan Foreman. They follow her, and they meet her grandfather, the Doctor, who is very angry at them and kidnaps them and brings them in his time machine to the time of the cavemen. This story was written by Anthony Coburn. It was directed by Waris Hussein and produced by Verity Lambert. The iconic theme music was written by Ron Grainer and realized by Delia Derbyshire at the Radiophonic Workshop. I love this story. I think it's a great first episode. It introduces the characters in a way that shows their individual personalities, their strengths, and their weaknesses. It also showcases the different characters' relationships with one another very well. I think as far as a pilot episode goes, it's not bad. It's pretty good. In our introduction to Ian and Barbara, we see them teasing each other, and Barbara confides in Ian about her worries about Susan, and so immediately we get the sense that they're not just colleagues. They have some sort of friendship, or maybe even more. They're at least work friends. And we see that they have kind of a chemistry together. They enjoy each other's company. They enjoy spending time together. They're like making jokes and laughing, but they're also, able to talk to each other about more difficult things. I think it's really, we understand very quickly what their relationship is like. We also see that both of them are very kind people. They worry about Susan. They offer to drive her home. And they follow her home when they think something might be up with her and she might be in some kind of danger. It is a little bit creepy that these two school teachers follow their pupil home, but, I'm going to chalk it up to it's TV, it's a different time, they had to get to that place, so, but they clearly care. In a series of flashbacks, we see Susan, we see that she is pretty headstrong. She points out when she thinks her teachers are wrong, and she kind of argues back and forth with them. But we also see that she does get embarrassed quite quickly. She wants to fit in. She wants to be accepted. When her peers are mocking her, she does get embarrassed, and she does apologize. So clearly, she does feel a little insecure. We also learn that Barbara is more apprehensive, while Ian is more reckless. When they get to the dump, we see this illustrated when they're talking in the car. And then we meet the doctor, a very abrupt and grumpy doctor. Much different than the doctors that you would see today. Even the more grumpier this doctor, is much grumpier than even 12, who was pretty grumpy. So I love when the teachers walk into the police box and Barbara is all concerned about Susan and Ian is just trying to figure out where the hell they are. It's very funny to me that Barbara is like, Susan, are you okay? Oh my goodness. While she's in this trans-dimensional box that doesn't obey the laws of physics. It's very funny. I would also be remiss if I didn't point out that the doctor does say a racist comment that I will not be repeating, and that I hope in new episodes we will not be repeating either. It's kind of rare that the doctor says something racist or sexist. Sexist happens a lot more. Of course, he says things that are borderline, because this did come out in the 60s, and so, but I'd say that this is one of the rare occasions that I was really struck by a comment. The doctor also takes an opportunity to monologue about his and Susan's past. And then everybody fights, and it's pretty accurate to how a guardian and their child fights, talking about the doctor and Susan. I do feel like Ian and Barbara don't grasp the severity of the situation they're in at all. You walk into this box, whether or not you believe that it's a time machine, the man is not letting you leave, and he's getting increasingly angry and agitated, and the young girl is begging him not to do whatever he's about to do, so she clearly believes whatever is about to happen, and you are just come on, let's walk out of here. You're not at all trying to diffuse the situation that is obviously very tense for the other two people. I think Ian is just getting angry at the ridiculousness of all this, when you literally just walked into a box that's way bigger on the inside, right? So why are you getting angry at the ridiculous of this situation, knowing that this box already defies physics? But I guess I understand the thought of you're so shocked that you're just angry. So I get that. They all kind of get kidnapped by the doctor. And in the second episode of the serial, we have a little cold open introducing our secondary characters, Za and his girlfriend, Her, as well as his rival, Cal. So they are the cavemen. When they land, Barbara hears and sees Susan's conviction, and she immediately believes what Susan is saying about them being in a time machine and them having moved. She just believes it. She's a very malleable mind, whereas, Ian does not. They leave the box, and they are obviously not where they left from. They're now in a desert type place. Ian is driving himself crazy. He's unable to accept the reality of what has happened. Meanwhile, also, Susan notes that the TARDIS is supposed to blend into the scenery, and that it hasn't. It stayed a police box, and that implies that this is the first time it's done that, and that it's broken for the first time. Usually it changes. So, when the Doctor goes missing, Ian regains his composure and starts to think rationally again, while Susan has some sort of meltdown. I'm not a fan of the way she breaks down immediately. I think that she's supposed to be relatable to children, and so this is her breaking down like a small child would, like, where's my dad? Where's my grandpa? Whatever. But, she's supposed to be a time traveler who's, from the future, and her grandfather wanders off, and she, completely loses all her logical thinking and just isn't able to function. I will say that the way Carol Ann Ford plays this scene is amazing. It's hilarious. Throwing herself, on the different rocks and to and fro, it's hilarious. Then we have an incredibly long scene of exposition with the cavemen. They repeat the exact same sentence in somewhat different words over and over and over again. In today's standard, that's a yikes. Then we have another incredible scene where Susan jumps on a caveman's back. One second, she loses her grandfather and she's unable to function, and the next second, she's jumping on a caveman's back. I think it's a great example of what Susan could have been. She could have been rash, but decisive, with her heart in the right place. Unfortunately, we don't get much of that Susan in the show. They tend to show her more as a scared child. Can't really do anything for herself. And she's supposed to be, 16, 17? Have you ever met a 16, 17-year-old? They do not like to be told what to do, but Susan needs to be told what to do, because or else she doesn't do anything. Anyway, the group finds themselves awaiting their death in the Cave of Skulls. This is where the Doctor apologizes. It's unclear at this point whether he genuinely feels bad for his human companions or just for himself. But Susan reassures him that it's not his fault, even though objectively, kinda is. They wouldn't be there in the first place if he hadn't flipped out and kidnapped the teachers. But, she loves him, so yeah. In the third episode of the serial, we see the cavemen sleeping, and there is excellent use of music to cause a disconcerting ambiance. I really love that old-timey, sci-fi music. The travelers realize there is air coming in to the cave somehow, and they start squabbling again. I have a love-hate relationship with the pacing of these old shows. If this had been filmed in today's era, Susan or Barbara would have been like, there's no time to fight, we've got to get out of here, we have to work together, or something like that, so we can get to the plot. But in these older shows, they added so much fluff and filler anyway, that squabbling and the infighting, although it adds nothing to the plot or even the character development, at least it feels like something is happening, which isn't the case for a lot of the scenes where it's just people doing nothing. While on the one hand, I'm pretty sure I could cut down this 80-minute serial into a 20-minute episode and it still make perfect narrative sense. I do enjoy how much they focused on the world building in some areas. I really don't need to know every minor character's tea, but I do enjoy it sometimes. I think it can lend itself to creating a more realistic world. So then the doctor makes a suggestion that amounts to, hey, find a sharp rock and it'll cut the rope. And Susan is like, wow, you're a genius. So they're definitely trying to paint the doctor as like the most intelligent, the leader of the group, without actually having him get them out of there. I don't know if it's meant to show that he's just too weak to put his great mind to use, or if it's simply because, plot-wise, they need the group to stay in the cave. Ian does offer to untie the women first when he gets a stone, but the doctor tells him he should be first, because he's the most physically capable. It's a really interesting show of humility for the doctor, especially since in later episodes, and by later episodes I mean every single episode after this, he starts to think very highly of his own skills. I mean, I can even think of a time he abandons Clara because he thinks it's better to save himself than for them to both get caught. His words.
Sorry, too slow. There's no point in catching us both.
Oh, give me the screwdriver.
I might need it.
So, even when he has good intentions, he does come back for her in that episode. It's just very big-headed of him. Then, when Barbara is surprised that the doctor is trying to help, he says one of my favorite Doctor Who quotes of all times, and our first cued, qualified quote. Here's the quote.
Fear is with all of us and always will be. Just like that other sensation that lives with it. Hope.
So anyway, after that, there's an old woman who sets them free because she's afraid of fire. Za finds out and follows them. Barbara starts crying because they're sort of lost in the wood. And Ian holds her and comforts her, which is sweet, but he's sort of aggressive about it. He's like, calm down. But, you know, it's a very tense, high-stress situation, so I forgive him. Then the men argue about who the leader of the party is, which, simply put, is ridiculous. You don't need to have a leader. You can just get out of the woods. Everyone helps. There doesn't need to be a appointed governor here. Then Barbara starts screaming bloody murder because she trips over a dead boar. I mean, okay, I'll admit, it would be startling to trip over a dead boar, but my goodness, I just know this scene wasn't written by a woman. They were in a cave like 5 minutes ago, full of human skulls, and she trips over a dead boar in the forest and starts sobbing and screaming uncontrollably. Yeah, okay. My goodness. Let's chalk it up to excessive stress. She's probably just like, that's gonna be us soon. So, Za, who's following them, is attacked by a wildcat, and the group hears, and Barbara rushes in to help. The doctor, he's very distraught. He doesn't understand why no one's listening to him. He's like, we need to leave. These people don't care about us, so we shouldn't care about them. But he sticks around because he's not going to leave Susan alone. He picks up a rock, presumably to try and kill Za. To viewers who've only watched New Who, this would be kind of shocking in a way. The doctor, they know, is peaceful to a fault most of the time. But that cold streak is still in there. And even in New Who, they have accessed it and fights against the Daleks, or even in Flux when she tricks the Sontarans into destroying themselves. But yeah, he used to be much more homicidal. Anyway, Cal, the rival, whips the tribe into a frenzy and sets up an ambush at the TARDIS. So probably realizing Cal is way more dangerous left unchecked, the Doctor sticks up for Za and proves to the tribe that Cal is a liar and a murderer. Or maybe he was just trying to create a distraction and a diversion so they could escape, but if that's the case, he doesn't take the opportunity when they're all like throwing rocks at Cal to get him to leave. They just stand there trying to talk sense into a bunch of cavemen. So there's a long fight scene with hilarious reaction cuts. But even after giving the tribe fire, establishing Za as the leader of the tribe, they don't let them go free. So Susan has a brilliant idea that Ian repurposes as his own. She's like, hey, look, these skulls on fire sticks look really creepy. They look like they could be alive. And Ian is like, no! They look like they could be dead! Oh, I've just had a wonderful idea! Or whatever. And it's like, well, no, Susan had the idea. Anyway, they use the idea to scare the tribespeople and escape, but Za rallies the people, and then there's like a really confusing forest chase with like, there's so many cuts, and I mean, you can't tell what the hell is going on. I think they filmed it actually at night because you can't see anything. What's important is they make it back to the TARDIS, and once they get going, the Doctor implies that he could take the teachers back to 1963 if he had more time to fix their destination, but that he didn't this time. They land again, but this time, even though they left in much more of a hurry, neither Ian nor Barbara is rattled in any way, much less pass out, as they had done previously the first time they took off. Which leads me to my question. Did the Doctor make the first ride bumpy on purpose? Probably not. Probably it's just a continuity error, like they didn't think that one through, but I like my theory more that the Doctor did it on purpose to, shake them up. So that's the first episode. Even though there are many parts where I'm rolling my eyes and I think it's really stupid or even hilarious, the way that the women, especially in this episode, are characterized, I do really enjoy this episode. I like the way that everybody is constantly fighting and yet they still manage to get what they need to get done. I think that's funny. I just think it's really nice to see like Ian and Barbara and Susan are helping these people who have spent all this time trying to kill them because they know that these people just know no better, and that the Doctor is just completely averse to this because it's like the opposite of every Doctor Who story today, where the Doctor is like, hey, we need to save these people, and the humans are like, ew, no. Whereas in this beginning of the series here, it's the Doctor who's like, we should just let these people die, and the humans are like, no, we need to save them. So I think that's a really interesting thing. It's like he learned from the best, So that's it for this first episode of Cute. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm really excited to make more episodes in this series. I have tons of other shows I want to do. Avatar The Last Airbender and Korra, Victorious, just like all these stupid shows that either like I really, really love and have thoughts on, or shows that I watched as a kid and then rewatched as an adult and I was like, what the heck was I watching as a kid? Just tons of stuff like that. I would love to have you join me for the next episode. If you liked it, leave a like, comment, subscribe. All of my social medias will be linked in the description and at the end of this video as per usual. And I will see you next time. Bye!